When looking for the king of podcasts, you're at the wrong channel.
Well, excuse me!
Looking for good ideas for life? You're far from good hands.
Hey, bud, what's your problem?
If you think the listener is always right, you're far from the right place.
Out of order! Even in the future, nothing works!
Hosted by a Northeasterner by birth, but a rebel by choice.
Are you threatening me?
If you want a host that floats between love and madness,
and we know the night is always gonna be here anyway. Thinking of you's working up my appetite. Looking forward to a little afternoon delight.
then play on and listen to Crazy Train Radio.
All right, guys, listen to this blues riff and B. Watch me for the changes and try and keep up, okay?
Within the gaming world, there are your general gamers, but then there are those that enjoy the dark underbelly of gaming. If you're one of those that enjoy the dark underbelly of gaming, we certainly got the place to send you. Scorpion Lair Games. That's right, Scorpion Lair Games is the creators of the true crime hit Killers, the card game. Let's not forget they also have Killers Clothing Company, their profiler game, and things like the 5-Minute Murder channel on YouTube. And we certainly can't forget the new book that is certainly a hit, Beyond the Headliners, True Crimes, Myths, and Legends. Make sure you visit Jeff and the Scorpion Lair Games on Facebook and everywhere today.
Hey everybody, I'm Oren Weisfeld. I'm the author of The Golden Generation, a book about the history of Canadian basketball, and I am on Crazy Train Radio.
Hey folks, it's your least favorite host in the podcast world, Croc, Jonathan Steele. And boy, do we have a good one for you today.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, this next guest is a writer based out of Toronto, Canada, and he covers Canadian basketball and also the intersection of sports and politics for publications such as The Guardian, Toronto Star, Vice, Slam, Sportsnet, Yahoo, and others. He has a debut book out called The Golden Generation, How Canada Became a Basketball Powerhouse. Let's welcome Oren Weisfeld. Did I pronounce that last name correct?
Weisfeld. Yeah.
Weisfeld.
Yeah, thanks so
Oren
much.
Weisfeld. How
Thanks.
are you, sir?
I'm doing well. I just watched Team Canada beat the Czechia in the quarterfinals of the hockey tournament. That was a really good game. So I'm feeling the Canadian pride.
Don't blame me there. But, I will start there. And obviously, we're talking about the Winter Olympics and stuff that he just brought up. But in general, and I'm a huge hockey nut,
Hmm.
But obviously, you always think Canada for hockey, especially here in North America. But with your book being about the ebbs and flows of Canadian basketball, do you think basketball will overtake that? Because it seems like there's a lot of immigration that Canada has always had. So, you got hockey, which is number one. Then you have people from other countries bringing basketball and soccer, even, or football if you're talking overseas. So, do you see that overtaking hockey at some point?
Yeah, I think it's possible. It's a discussion I think a lot of Canadians have. And yeah, in the book, it's called The Golden Generation, and it's kind of about how this generation of Canadians are doing things in basketball that we never thought would be possible. And there seems to be somewhat of a changing of the guard, or at least two kind of programs going in different directions, with the Hockey Canada program, almost lost to the Czechia in the quarterfinals. It looks like they're on a downhill, at least in terms of participation when it comes to hockey at the youth level. It's really been going down because it's so expensive and reasons like that. And meanwhile, sports like basketball and soccer, the participation are on the up and up. So it's yeah, I do think basketball will overtake hockey in popularity, but it might be a long, long time away. We might be talking 100 years from now still, but eventually it seems like that's the trajectory we're on. But we're not there yet.
Well, what about media coverage? Because it's funny, I just spoke with a legendary media person from the Toronto area yesterday that also has a book out. And one of the things we were talking about was the changes of media and such,
Mm.
especially in Canada there. So, do you think that will play a part of how basketball is looked overall in Canada?
Yeah, I would like to hope so, but right now it's pretty grim and it's pretty disappointing how little the Canadian media invests into basketball compared to a sport like covering hockey. But again, yes, but I don't really see the change happening as quickly as I would like to see it. I think there is more of an appetite for basketball content than Canadians are getting. But with that said, definitely it's growing. It's more than it ever has been. The media companies are kind of forced to by the fact that we have 25 NBA players now. They can't really just refuse to cover that. And we have obviously Shea Gilgeous-Alexander, the reigning MVP. So I feel like they're catching on in ways because they have to, not really getting out ahead of it and investing ahead of what could be. But eventually, I think there'll be more and more opportunities for people, yeah, to cover basketball. And like I've made a career out of covering Canadian basketball, so it is possible.
Well, to dive into the history a little bit there and really discover the untold story, I think, well, you had to look at Steve Nash's breakthrough at the 2000 Olympics, even and then there's a little bit of a struggle afterwards for 20 years or so. You just mentioned that SJA, being the reigning MVP, but was it Steve Nash in the Olympics, or would you say it was more of a Vince Carter that really started off this boom for basketball in Canada?
I think Vince Carter probably had a bigger effect in terms of inspiring young kids watching the NBA and watching the Raptors to play. But then Steve Nash probably had a bigger effect when it came to the infrastructural changes. Because Canadian institutions had to kind of catch up to the fact that they had missed this guy, right? That he was the best high school player in Canada in Victoria, and he only got one D1 offer, right, from an American university, which was Santa Clara. And that was because Canadians, we didn't have AU programs, we didn't have prep schools, we didn't have, you know, good enough coaching at young enough ages, and um, especially we just weren't putting our athletes in front of the best coaches, which were American D1 coaches, which was the best way to get to the NBA. So there was a reckoning that happened after him, and he was part of that because he worked with Canada Basketball as a general manager while he was still in the NBA, finishing up his career with the Lakers. So he was part of that infrastructural change too, working with Canada Basketball and creating youth programs and getting the community involved. But Vince probably had a bigger impact in terms of the inspirational side of it.
Awesome. But
Mhm.
let's see. There's so much I can dive
Mhm.
into, but I do want to mention that this book, The Golden Generation, was with or was published with ECW Press. Love those guys over there. Been had a great relationship with those guys for several years at this point. Thank you, Emily, for all you're doing, stepping in for Claire. But it was your friend Alex Wong, excuse me, that
Mhm.
helped made the connection to ECW Press, or was it just in general in putting a picture book?
Yeah, Alex Wong has helped me a lot. He's a good friend of mine, obviously part of the Hello and Welcome podcast over there with William Liu and Jerome Chang. And Um, I had messaged him a long time ago about getting some help in the industry, and that's how we kind of started talking, and he's been super helpful since. And yeah, when I wanted to pitch this book, he was the first person I went to just learn about how you pitch a book, who to talk to, all this stuff. And he did put me in touch with a couple publishers. Yeah, I can't remember if ECW was one of them, but he helped me and that he really helped me learn how to, pitch a book because it goes through a bunch of steps with publishers before it gets greenlit. Um, so yeah, I'm super thankful for him. He also helped me edit the book and took a look at the first draft. So yeah, I'm a big fan of what those guys are doing for Canadian basketball as well, albeit, covering the Raptors. And yeah, it's good to have friends in the industry.
Absolutely. I've heard of Alex, but don't know you. But hello, Alex. I hope at some point to connect with you, you know. I've heard nothing but positive things. But so, you know, he Alex helps with the pitch. And so where do we go from here as far as the development of the book? Because obviously something like this has to be a labor of love in a lot of ways. So hey, you know what? You cover basketball, all that stuff, but how do we go about, all right, what direction do I go to put the book together? What, I mean, there's just so many
Yeah.
elements. So wh
Yeah.
where does this start for you?
So like really it starts going back to covering the Raptors and NBA games starting around 2018 and just seeing every year more and more Canadians coming into the NBA. And I was curious about why that was. How come all of a sudden we had this massive jump in talent from only ever having Steve Nash and Joel Anthony, Todd McCullough, a handful of NBA players, and then all of a sudden we have 20, 25 this season. So that was a curiosity to me. And at the same time, I started covering Team Canada. In 2021, I went to the Olympic qualifying tournament out here in Victoria and watched them lose to the Czech Republic, which was to not make it to the Tokyo Olympics. But that's when I knew I wanted to start covering Team Canada and kind of understand like how come there was a divide here between the grassroots success where we're producing all these NBA players, but the national team hasn't had success since 2000, since Steve Nash led them. So it was a 24-year gap. So that's kind of when I knew there was a story. I knew wanted people would be curious to learn about how did Canada get back to the Olympics after so long, if they ever made it. And so I was obviously watching closely when Canada went to the World Cup in 2023, and they go on a great run, beat France in the opening game. They end up beating Spain in the main qualifier, which that win gets Canada an Olympic berth, an automatic Olympic berth. And they obviously continue to go on and beat America and win the bronze medal at that tournament. So that's when I kind of started pitching the book. And yeah, Alex helped me pitch the book, talked to a few publishers. ECW gave me a deal. And from then, I started doing the research. So just reading everything I could, whether it was books or articles or online databases from certain newspapers going back to the 90s to read. And then I started interviewing, as many people as I could kind of around these guys. And then after about 100 interviews, started writing it. But yeah, I had a pretty good idea of the story I wanted to tell, and it changed along the way for sure with different subjects coming up and different interviews. But I kind of knew I wanted to tell a more linear kind of trajectory of how Canada became this powerhouse, and not just in one way, but kind of flipping back and forth between Team Canada and the players, and then the grassroots, like infrastructural changes as well.
So you mentioned the interviews and all there. As you're doing your homework and stuff, is there a particular story or person that really stood out that maybe surprised you when doing that part of putting the book together?
Yeah, there was definitely a lot of things I didn't know and things that surprised me. Um, I would say Andrew Wiggins is one of them. I guess just like the impact he had, I guess I didn't always understand because he's my age. So I went to high school in Toronto at the same time of him. And I guess because of that, I wasn't really following along at the level that some people were. Because what I learned was that a lot of the people who are younger than him, whether it's Shai Gilgeous-Alexander or RJ Barrett or Dylan Brooks, these guys, who are a few years younger than him, they were really watching what he was doing at Vaughan and then going on to play AAU for CIA Bounce and become the number one ranked prospect in America. And he was a huge inspiration for them because he was so close in age. He came from Toronto, he came from the same schools that those guys went to. And that helped, like RJ gave me a quote in the book, how it helped him believe that he could be the number one player in the country, which he eventually became when he was in high school. So Andrew Wiggins' impact, I think, is underrated in Canada because he hasn't played for the national team as much as a lot of people would have hoped. And he's kind of not gotten them over the top when he has played. So he has like somewhat of an unfair reputation, but yeah, his impact was a bit surprising to me.
Well, let's backtrack just a little bit because there's been ebbs and flows, I would think, with the sport of basketball in Canada. And for years, you had teams in the 70s and 80s, coached by Jack Donahue. And over time, you guys have had, when I say you guys, Canada has had players come into the NBA and be successful.
Yeah.
So, what was it about those teams of the 70s and 80s, then struggled again in the 90s before 2000 and, things ebb and flow? What was it about some of those early teams that maybe didn't get noticed, like a Nash, a Carter, you know what I mean? When you think on a NBA
hmm
scale and or international scale, where I think the game's talked about more internationally now than it's ever been.
Yeah, exactly. The national team at that time, in the 70s, it wasn't really a platform to get to the NBA. It was more something you chose to do, either go pro or go play for the national team, because the pros, the NBA players couldn't play in the Olympics, right? So
Yeah.
that didn't change until later. So yeah, a lot of Canadian kids like Leo Routens and Jay Triano, these guys grew up wanting to play for Canada, wanting to represent the national team. Their dreams were not to go play in the NBA because it wasn't even on TV and stuff like that. So I think that was the disconnect there. The teams were great, like you said. We qualified for every Olympics under Donahue and every World Cup. We came fourth in the Olympics a couple times. Won a gold medal at the University Games in Canada in '83. But yeah, those players in a lot of cases had second jobs that they went to after playing basketball. A lot of them played overseas, but it wasn't a team full of NBA players, and I think yeah, it was a number of things. Kids not picking up the game young enough, kids not having the inspiration of the NBA, not knowing how to get there, not knowing the American basketball system to get to the NBA. So it just wasn't really on Canadians' radars until the 90s and the 2000s.
So were there, because I wouldn't notice, and like you said, NBA guys didn't play in the Olympics till '92, the Dream Team and such. So
Mhm.
a lot of folks went to represent their country, obviously. Did there was there anybody that made that transition that once they represented their team in country, was did they ever make the transition to try to make the NBA after the fact? All right, I accomplished this one goal. Let me see if I can do this.
Well, I remember a story with Jay Triano, and the answer is not a yes for him, but he got drafted by the Lakers when he was with the national team, and he left and he went to Lakers training camp, but a few days into camp, he just said, like, I'm not gonna do this. Like, in part because his heart was with the national team, and also I think in part because he didn't maybe think he was gonna make that team or play a whole lot. So he just went back. So there were a lot of cases I heard of definitely players choosing not to chase that NBA dream because their heart was with the national team and you couldn't do both. But in terms of players, yeah, like a ton of players, at least when it came to the junior team, a lot of players went to play for the junior national team, whether it was like, a Jamal McGlure before he was in the NBA, played for the junior national team, Steve Nash, and then these guys eventually made their way to the NBA.
Yeah, because like I think even to this day, like Steve Nash, for example, is so underrated.
Mhm.
And just because he, after playing, went into coaching and all that stuff. So
Mm.
I still think I maybe got lost in a lot of the shuffle as far as greats from the NBA, we'll say. But who would you say is probably the best Canadian basketball player that's come out? Obviously, like we said, we have a current MVP with SJA and such. Carter was Carter Canadian, or did he just play for Toronto?
Yeah,
How
he
was that?
just played for Toronto.
Okay.
He's from America.
So, there's guys who've come through the ranks. Yeah, I couldn't remember with Vince, but just a lot of talent has come through the ranks of the NBA, at least on this side of the border. Who's the best Canadian player do you think that's stood out for you from a NBA side of things?
Yeah, I think now it has to be Shea Gilgeous-Alexander. I think he overtook Steve Nash, and he's obviously still building on his resume, but just leading a team to a championship as the best player on that team in an NBA, I think where that is, getting better and better. It's harder to do that in a way just because the level of talent is so high. And he's on his way right now to probably winning his second consecutive MVP, just like Steve Nash did. So I think Shea has the slight edge now, but it's definitely just those two are the only ones in the conversation is Nash and Shea. And one day you could see maybe a Jamal Murray catching up. He definitely has the potential, and he's having a really great season. But yeah, Shea for me gets the nod.
Well, what about then on the international level? Who would it still be those?
Mm.
Would it still be Shea? Would it obviously Nash
I think
was great.
Yeah, I mean, listen, guys like Eli Pasquale and Jay Triano and Leo Rounds, like I wasn't there back then to watch them, but I know they were the leaders of those teams that we talked about under Jack Donahue and had more success really than anyone with Canada. So I think they definitely deserve but from what I've seen, I think Nash, just because he played so much more games than Shea for the national team, and he obviously led them on a really amazing run in 2000 that caught a lot of people off guard. So I think Nash still has, yeah, a bit more of a resume with Team Canada than anybody else, at least in the modern history of the game. But if this next Olympic quad, Shea is able to get Canada back and get Canada a medal, then he'll definitely surpass everyone then.
Who, at least on the international level, would you say people aren't talking about with basketball players from Canada? Obviously, we keep mentioning Shea, Nash,
Hmm.
etc.
Hmm.
There's Murray you just mentioned. Who who is somebody that's ready to really pop off and people aren't talking about that you think would surprise folks?
Yeah, I'm not sure how many people, especially in Philadelphia where you are and in America, are talking about Dylan Brooks. Here people are talking about him. I don't know. Is he a big name there quite yet?
I think he's making his name, I would
Yeah,
say, because
yeah,
Dylan Brooks, does attract some attention. But
yeah.
do you think Dylan would be the one that really like just pops off that would be on that elite list that we've talked about?
Yeah, for sure. I think he's ready. And I even underrated him at the 2023 World Cup, where he ended up being by far Canada's second best player behind Shea, and he scored 39 points in that bronze medal game, that victory over Team USA. And that to me was a bit of a breakout. And obviously now people know he's gone on to play this season in the NBA for the Phoenix Suns and just kind of same level of defense that everyone's got used to, which to me is one of the best defenders in the world. And then also added a level of offensive punch where he could really create his own shot now. He's been really hot in the mid-range all season. And so he's kind of that 1-2 punch now, I think, with Shea in the national team as well. Um, he's really been our second best player over this last little bit, but obviously Jamal Murray has the potential to also come in and be that player. Andrew Nemhard, I really think is a great, great player. RJ Barrett, Zach Edey, if he gets healthy, will be big for Canada. But yeah, I would say like between Dylan Brooks and Jamal Murray are kind of the two guys with the most potential to break out at the next tournament.
So, what you've covered the game for a while now. What do you look at as far as when you're ranking players to be not only just great Canadian athletes, but just a game across the board? Because are you an offensive minded player? Are you defensive? Are you overall? What do you look at when you're looking at players and ranking players, etc.?
I think a big thing is like I'm not a scout, so I won't pretend to have a
But you
great,
still have a knowledge of the
take.
game.
Yeah, I think for me a big thing I've learned is like players who could play alongside stars are kind of underrated. Like there's a lot of basketball players who can score the ball really well as long as they have the ball in their hand all game, right? But there's few players who I think Andrew Nemhard's a great example of this, who don't really ever need the ball, can just play defense, can just make the right play every single time. And that enables him to play with stars like Tyrese Halliburton in Indiana or like Shea in the national team. And RJ Barrett's also really good at that on the Raptors. He's really had a good season as a role player this year, just playing off the kind of the top guys. And sometimes it's harder than it looks to do that with guys who are used to having the ball in their hands a lot. It's hard for them to adjust to playing more of an off-ball role. And so that's one thing I look for sure.
Now, obviously, I guess this is a little more broad, but it seems like no matter what the sport, Canadians really tend to rally around our teams that might be considered underdogs, like say that 2019 Raptors team, or recently the Blue Jays and such. That what is it about the, I guess, Canadian pride that makes your sports fan so special? When
Yeah. I don't know. To be honest, I'm a little disappointed with Canada right now in terms of our sports fandom. I think it could be better. I think, I look at Europe and what they've kind of invested in sports and some of their national sports federations, like in basketball, or they outspend, Canada by 6 times, in other sports up to 10 times. So I want Canada to get there in terms of like traveling to every game and investment and press and fans, and I don't think we are kind of like the top of the world anymore. But with that being said, yeah, sport is still like has always been a big part of Canadian identity, especially with hockey, I think has been the sport that we really rally around as a country and it brings a lot of Canadians together. And so that's always been a part of Canadian identity. And now I think we're kind of in that adjustment zone where we have to make that fandom transcend hockey and make it, go to basketball and soccer and cricket and all these other sports that are also Canadian. So I think we're in that transition point right now.
So, with all that being said, what is next for you? What are we? Is it just going to be publicity for the book, or are we thinking about another book? What's coming down the line here in 2026 for you?
Yeah, I mean, continuing definitely to promote the golden generation, and I think I'll be continuing that up until the 28 Olympics, where obviously I think a lot of people are excited to see Canada really at their peak and be playing against teams like Team USA and France and Serbia. So we in Canada are really hoping for a gold medal moment then to beat the USA finally in basketball. So I'll be promoting it up until then. And other than that, yeah, just continuing to write about a range of topics like sport and technology. And I will be pitching another book, so hopefully that goes through, but don't have any updates to share right now. But if people are interested, they can always follow me on Twitter at Oren Weisfeld. And yeah, I hope people buy the book. It's only $19 in America. It's pretty affordable, and it's a pretty quick read too. So yeah.
Oren, thank you so much for the time, sir.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. Appreciate it.
Hey folks, looking for the ultimate destination for the nerd enthusiasts and collectors? Well, we found the spot for you. Nerds Nest Collectibles is a haven for nerds, geeks, and fans alike, as they have many different products and certainly more to come. Make sure you go ahead and visit them at nerdsnestcollectibles.com. Check them out.
Hey everybody, this is Murray the Magician all the way from Las Vegas, and you are listening to Crazy Train Radio. Listen all the way through, you're not going to miss a thing.